Charts are available in a variety of format and appearances, and overall, many of the same properties apply from one chart to the next. In this video, we'll take a look at how to add and modify the appearance of a clustered bar graph. Much of the content we will see here will also apply to stacked charts, multi-row bar and line charts, and distributed and sorted bubble or dot charts. We'll start by adding a report container and then selecting bar ribbon and cluster bar graph. The goal of this first example will be to show you the open versus closed incidents at each campus. We're going to start on the category axis X tab. Here, we can identify what values will be represented on the X axis. In this case, let's say we want our different campus locations here. In the coordinate value field, search for and select the campus field. In the properties listed below, under the coordinate label section, you can adjust the font for the appearance of the campus names. Next, on the Series Access Y tab, we need to identify what each bar will represent. For this, we have two options. We can use a formula to determine the values, or we could use a series to determine the values. We'll look at this twice. In the first example, we'll go with the formula option. In the coordinate value field, we can search for and select the value for this series. This can be anything from our query, which could include status, in which case we would have just 2 bars for each campus representing open versus closed, or disposition, where we could see the different states of our records, and so on. As mentioned earlier, we're going to go with status. It is important to note that status only has 2 values, open or closed, yet in the sample up above, it shows 5 values. Keep in mind the report designer has no idea how many values actually exist at this point. The query must run first to actually build and populate the chart. So this is only a sample of what the final product could look like. Don't worry about the extra values that are being represented here. Similar to what we just did not too long ago on the x-axis, in the properties below, we can adjust the appearance of the series values font. Also here, we could choose to move the legend if we want it to appear somewhere else other than on the right side of the chart. Next, on the Value Axis Z tab, like our simple bar graph, we need to identify the calculation that each open or closed bar will display. As with some of our previous chart examples, we can see that the default value is a count, which again we will keep, but we could change it if we wanted to. Next, we need to identify what value will be counted. In this case, we can choose the incident number. Once again, in the properties listed below, we can modify the appearance of the font for these calculations, as well as identify the format of the value. In this case, we'll eliminate the decimal places for the number value since we know we won't have a point XX for an incident after they get counted. For now, we'll skip over the Chart tab as there aren't really any properties here that are required modification-wise at this point. On the Diagram Area tab, we can add in a title for the chart, as well as modify the font for its appearance as we've seen previously. In the background field, we could choose to show or hide the light blue background behind the chart as well. As with other charts, it's best to click the OK button now and add the chart to our report rather than make any color changes, because they may not hold and we would have to reselect. Once it has been added, we can double-click on our chart and then go back in and change the colors as needed. Now let's take a look at another option and use the series to determine the values for our bar graph as opposed to the formula that we used in the first example. To save some time, we can copy and paste this first chart so that we don't have to reproduce some of the property settings that we've already defined. Now we can double-click on this second chart to reopen the properties. This time, let's have a chart that shows us the sum of the total loss, total recoveries, and net loss for each campus. We can see that the properties from the first chart have carried over to this one, so we can jump right to the Series Access Y tab. At the top of the properties, let's change the Use a Formula to determine the values to Use a Series to determine the values. It is normal for the chart preview to disappear when this is changed. We'll see that it will come back after we've added our series. In the Series Definitions field in the properties listed below, click on the icon to add these new series. In the window that opens up next, click the Insert button, and then in the properties on the right, under the Name field, we can give this series a name, in this case Total Loss. This names the series value in our window on the left so we know which one's which. In the coordinate value field, click on the Formula button. This time, for our calculation, we want a sum of our losses. So we'll select the sum function, and then in the content field above, we'll search for and select our total loss field. At the bottom of the properties is the coordinate label. This will be the label seen in the chart. We'll keep it as total loss, but we'll just delete the underscore. Just note that this is a free text field, so we must ensure that we keep the quotation marks here. As with other charts, we don't want to change the color yet, but we can come back and edit this once we've initially added the chart. Next, we'll repeat this process 2 more times, once for the total recoveries and once for the net loss. And since we copied this chart, we'll probably also have to change a couple of other properties, such as the chart title, which we can modify by going to the Diagram Area tab. As we discussed, since we didn't change the colors the first time around, we can now go back to that series access and click in our series definitions and modify the colors for each of our bars. Once we're finished, we can see what the final product now looks like.